What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to episode 33 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. According to John Maxwell, there are 21 indispensable qualities of a leader. They are character, charisma, commitment, communication, confidence, courage, discernment, focus, generosity, initiative, listening, passion, positive attitude, problem solving, relationships, responsibility, security, self-discipline, servanthood, teachability, and vision. And so this brings us to today's guest, who possesses many of these qualities. And I first met this guy while on a Zoom call with Jocko Willink and a couple other guys from his company, Echelon Front, and a large group of leaders from around the country and around the world, for that fact. Now, on Zoom calls, you have that little sidebar, you can ask questions. And I asked a question, and it was innocent enough question to say, hey, I was wondering about XYZ. And I was met with a host of answers, great answers from people all over the place. And it was just, hey, you should think about this or try this or do that or whatever. And it was so much more than I was even able to really take in at the moment, because I'm trying to talk. Because they were asking, I actually got on video and was talking with Jocko and all this different stuff. And I had to, copy and paste all of that onto a Word form so I could read it after, because there was so much to take in. However, one reply stood out to me because this person wanted to meet with me outside of this large group and help go over this roadblock I was facing. And it was all this different stuff that I was thinking. I was like, hey, how do I deal with this? And it was, you should try this. And the one person said, hey, let's get together outside of this so we have a little more time and we can actually kind of delve into it. And I said, that's great. I mean, I thought it was a fantastic idea, and I agreed. And it was obviously over Zoom because we're all over the place. And he agreed to meet with me and go over my conundrum. Now, kind of a sidebar on this, you guys might remember Jarrett Morris and Jeff McGreevy, who I've had on past episodes. Both of these gentlemen were on that Zoom call that day, and they chimed in asking, hey, if they could join our meeting. I want to talk about this too. And it was settled, and a time was set, which was great. So we did it after one of our Zoom meetings one day. So now during this meeting, as I was trying to figure out my issue, I was asked what kind of question I might have and what exactly I needed help with. Because I knew, I kind of put it out there what it was, but I didn't know the exact questions. It was like, I don't know what I don't know sort of thing. And so I said I wasn't quite sure. I didn't know the direction I needed to take, but I had a blank notebook and I had a full pen, and let's go from there. And ideas started coming forward, and we all said, hey, how about try this? Or you think about this? Have you done this? And I said, well, I've done this, but I haven't taken this direction with it. Okay, try that, blah, blah, blah. And information was shared that I'm still using to this day, and I'm still trying to implement or what might work for me. And then some things that may have got brought up that we've tried, like, okay, that doesn't necessarily work for me, whatever the case is. But the reason I tell this today is because those guys didn't have to reach out to me. That one in particular didn't have to reach out to me that day. And they did so on their own time, on their own dime, with nothing to gain, but to see development in another person who was going through a time that they'd already been through. And they said, hey, I've got this knowledge. Let me help you show you what I worked for me. And they didn't get anything out of it. There was no checks written, nothing like that. It was just, hey, I'm a servant. What was one of the characteristics that I just read of leadership before, right? And since then, I've been on multiple calls with this gentleman and with the whole group of Zoom folks. Not only that, but we were in meetings where he's normally there, but he wasn't there that day for whatever reason. But the participants in the group are always talking about him, saying, hey, he spoke into their lives one way or another. He helped them through something, or remember a comment he made. Remember he said this at one point, and he helped them work through something. And so this person's always speaking into people's lives, and he's always helping. He's always trying to help make people better by giving, and not expecting anything in return. So who is this guy? He's been a police officer for more than 25 years and is currently the chief of Pocatello, Idaho Police Department. And he's always striving to make things better for his officers and everybody that he meets. And we are honored to have him here with us today. Welcome, Chief Roger Shei. How you doing, sir?
Hello, good to be on the program, and just humbled to be here and be able to have this opportunity to, reach out and talk to people on a bigger platform. So
right. So I mean, who are you? I mean, why are you important to anybody? And not because I know you're going to say, well, I'm not, but I'm, I think you are, and a lot of people do. So, what makes you you?
I think what makes me is, a lot of things, kind of the way I was brought up, my parents, those people that I surround myself with, those people that I look up to, just being driven,
Sure.
and those are all things that, it's kind of hard when you say what makes you, and you look in the mirror, and that's you start to dive deep in who you are. I guess I kind of look at failures in the past and how I've learned from them, and situations I've been in, or bad leadership I've been around, or good leadership I've been around, and how to mimic that good leadership and how to fix that bad leadership. And
right,
it's like I remember growing up, in law enforcement and police work. I started my career in like 1990, back in the day, down in San Diego County.
Yeah.
as an explorer. I was just a young buck, and I growing up in San Diego, I was always getting hit up by the military recruiters, the Marines and the Navy, because that, being in San Diego, that was big. And
Right.
I always knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a police officer at a young age. I remember driving around, and I had this electric like a tricycle. It was electric powered, and we got videos of, well, it's not video, it's like on the 8mm film, right? I got this little helmet on and driving around, and watching Chips growing up back in the day, and shows like that kind of influence you. My brother influenced me. He was a sheriff's deputy for Riverside County. And I watched him, come home in his uniform, and I watched him, interact with people, and I always looked up to him. And, I knew what I always wanted to do. And,
well, with that, who was little Roger? What did he do other than ride around like that? I mean, were you, obviously, I'm going to guess you weren't just sitting at home watching TV all the time, episodes of Chips, which
no.
I did as well, but
who were you? Well, I growing up down in California, I did a lot of things. I played outside a lot. Weather was good. I went to the beach a lot. I wasn't the best student in high school. If the waves were good or there was snow in the mountains, we would maybe head up to Big Bear, or head to Stairs and Solana Beach and go surfing. But but like I said, I always knew what I wanted to do. And I was an active kid. I skinned my knees. I would disappear for hours. I probably drove my mom crazy growing up, getting into mischief and doing those things that a young boy does. And I was very active. I was involved in sports in high school. I swam and I wrestled. So I wrestled year round. So just
by being active and doing all that stuff, and then seeing you said your cousin or your brother?
My brother, yeah.
Yeah. And he was just so motivating to you to say, that's all I want to do is be a cop, huh?
Yeah, and I had some good mentors too. I had good coaches, growing up. And when I was 14, I got involved in martial arts at the American Colleges of Karate down in El Cajon, California, and I had some good teachers down there, some people I look up to, and surrounded myself with some people, and that kept me active too. So I even though I was out, sometimes creating hate and discontent, I was always
Sure.
I had a good structure. I was at practice with my at wrestling, or I was doing martial arts classes, or stuff like that, physical stuff. So
Right. Right. That reminds me of, you think about that, and everybody always, not everybody, but there's a lot of people that say, oh, I don't want to get my kid in martial arts because that's going to make them a bully, or it's going to make them mean. They're already trying to hurt somebody. Or, you were saying that you caused hate and discontent, and you did, a bunch of problems, and you didn't get great grades and all this different stuff. You're always messing around. But on the other side, you played sports and you did things that had solid boundaries. If you you did martial arts, you did all these things that say you can do this within this structure. And so that reminds me of the book On Killing by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, where he's talking about kids who don't have that structure, don't have those boundaries, are then going into, those are the kids who become the school shooters or the problem people. And the kids, it's not so much that they're doing things that are active or whatever. It's the discipline that's associated with those things that causes people to say, yes, I have a propensity for violence because that's why I went in the military, or I like shooting, or I like hunting, or whatever. But I don't hurt people. I don't want to hurt people. I know there's boundaries that I can and can't do. There's healthy boundaries in which. And so it sounds like, yes, as much of a problem child you might have been, with the boundaries that you had, you were solid. You were.
Yeah. And when I'm talking about that, we would go and get dirt clod fights as kids, or we would go
Right, yeah.
we watch Rocky, right? So it'd be a good idea to get the boxing gloves out, right? And go 15 rounds and
Right.
come home, and my mom would look at me and go, "What are you doing?" I covered in dirt clods, or
Right.
or covered in some marks from the massive neighborhood boxing match that we decided to have
Right.
as kids. And so that's kind of the stuff that I'm talking about. We were, or playing Dukes of Hazzard or something, and
Yeah.
you might have wrecked your bike, or built a fort, and the farmer's truck might have gone into the fort and stuff like that. So it's just,
Right.
it was good, healthy fun growing up. But you're right on those boundaries. It really, I think that's really good for kids to have some type of structure growing up, of knowing, it's kind of like decentralized command that we talk about all the time in our Extreme Ownership Academy,
Right.
EF Online, where you give people their left and their right boundaries, and then you let them maneuver from there. So I've tried to do that with my kids growing up. So
Yeah. So you, at 20 years old, you become an explorer, saying, I know what I want to do. I'm not going to talk to a recruiter. I know I want to wear
18,
blue, not green.
yeah,
Oh, at 18.
18, yeah.
And you become an explorer or whatever, and you're going into that. And that's all you want to do.
Yep.
Single-minded focus, huh?
Yep. Well, yeah, that. And, I wanted to go to work, and I was willing to do it so much, I would do it for free. So I was throwing freight at a grocery store. I was throwing freight at Ralph's in El Cajon on 2nd Street.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to school part-time at Grossmont College, and I was working patrol 2 or 3 nights a week with San Diego County Sheriff.
That's pretty cool. I bet as a kid, your eyes couldn't have been bigger. You couldn't have taken enough in. You were an absolute sponge.
Yeah.
And there was no end to it.
Yeah, it was, the things I learned back then from guys like Ronnie Hudson and Dave Weldon at the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. I used to this day. So those are all skills that I learned as a youngster.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You don't see that a lot, and like for me, when I started, I was absolutely green. I hadn't gotten to doing it, but I knew that's all I wanted to do for however long. And then when I finally got the opportunity after testing and competing against all these, at that time, hundreds of people during testing and stuff, it was just so different that that I get into it and I'm so wide-eyed, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And so when they're like, okay, go ahead and do this. Do what? I didn't know. So it was a little bit of a rougher start for me. And I wish I could have started earlier, but I think that when I started was when I'm supposed to start. I think that's just how the Lord set it up for me, or whatever the case is. So
Sure.
but no, I mean, that's, you don't, as an 18-year-old kid, I can only imagine, because I went into the Marines at 18, and I'm, getting yelled at, and the world was somebody else's world, and I was just in it. And it seems like it's a different story when you're tagging along and you're just soaking stuff in, huh?
Or that was our Explorer Academy was actually at the Naval Training Center. And so we had a company commander that was assigned to us that did a lot of yelling and screaming. And we were up at early morning, and we were going to bed late at night. So that was a good experience for me. It helped with the good foundation, having that good foundation. It's kind of like, building your house on a rock versus building your house on sand. So
right. Yeah.
Get a little biblical there. So
yeah, there you go. How long were you an explorer?
I was for 3 years. I was an explorer down there, and then I tested for Pocateel Police, and I moved up here in 1993. So
what made you do that?
So I tested down there a bunch, and it wasn't too successful with testing, and there was a change of leadership in the sheriff's department, and used to be like, if you were an explorer in good standing, you would get a job, and things just didn't work out. And my brother lived in Bannock County. He worked for the Bannock County Sheriff's Department. And at 20 years old, I bought a house for 50 grand, and I moved up to Pocatello, and I worked for the Bannock County Sheriff's as a reserve officer for a year in the jail. And I had tested for the police department up here, and I was just waiting to get a job.
That's pretty cool. And so you said your brother was down in California too, but then he went up to Bannock County as well.
Yeah, he his wife is from this area, so
there's a connection.
Yeah, he relocated up here, and we followed him, and I've lived here ever since 93.
And just love it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so you go to the police academy there, and did they have their own police academy, or was it a bunch of departments together, or how did they do it?
Yeah, back then it's kind of set up the same way now. It's just a little longer, but it was over in Meridian, over by Boise, and we it was agencies from all over the state. So
okay,
I think my academy class started off with like 50, ended up with 40 something. So kind of like every other academy, probably, start high and lower.
Yeah. For one reason or another, somebody drops out or leaves or does whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if we had anybody, maybe we had one person drop out of my class, but I remember a couple guys, they would go home because we could go home on the weekends, and they go home. One guy in particular, he came back and he was just not his normal self. We're like, what's the matter? He goes, my wife doesn't want to be married to a cop. I said, you're in the police academy. He's like, yeah, she just decided to tell me this weekend, and so he just came back to the academy with his wife having just left him, and he's just like, I don't get it. She knew the whole testing, and we were like 3 or 4 months in to the academy, and so you just never know. It's just kind of weird. So either they drop out or somebody drops out of their life, and so
those are important discussions to have before you go. I was single when I went, so it was like I had a conversation with me in the mirror, and he said, yeah, we're good to go. So
little Roger was like, yeah, this is what I've always wanted to do. He's sitting there, he's having
game on. Let's roll.
My wife was my just girlfriend at the time, and she'd already known I'd been testing and I'd been doing all this stuff before, and she's like, oh, that's cool, because her parents were both career military, and so she was like, oh yeah, that okay. Oh, so I don't have to do a background on you. They've already done it for me. So she was good with it. So
awesome.
So you become patrolman Shei, and you're now you get an FTEP, what we call field training. And so how did that go for you? Everything great?
You know, a lot of different experiences in FTO. The first month I was in FTO, you know, I was hanging a parking ticket on 12th and Clark Street and thinking, this is a boring night. And a call comes on the radio to respond to the Maverick at pole line in Alameda, and pole line in Alameda in reference to the clerk lying in a pool of blood. And I get there and the guy had been shot in the head 7 times. So that's, you know, my first month in training. And then we had a guy that had taken a bunch of road flares and actually made it look like a legit device and like a bomb and put it in front of the Bannock County Courthouse. So that was all my first month. I'm like, hey, this is going to be pretty fun up here, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. And you know, I look back at the late 90s, and we were busy. You know, we had a lot of stuff that was in town. The Dodge National Circuit Finals Rodeo was here. We had you know, our bar districts, and our bar district's always been fairly busy, but you know, I got involved in a lot of different stuff in field training. A lot of stuff that, you know, I still contact my field training officers today. They all still, one of them just retired, but most of them still work here.
That's pretty cool. And yeah, that's got to be kind of funny. And I know I have a similar thing where the guys who were looking at you, who were working with you, that were training you, teaching you everything, they see you grow, and now you advance past them, or whatever the case may be, or they retire and they see that you still keep going, and they remember, man, I remember when you were a little kid, or I remember when you were just this, you know, that sort of stuff. And I know guys, because I really struggled through FTEP, and I've got guys who are my field trainers who are they're fellow sergeants at this point, or now I'm now their supervisor, you know, whatever the case is. And I sit there and think back, man, I don't know more than you do. And they're like, well, because I just passed a test. I'm not better. I'm not, you know, anything like that. I just passed a test that, and you said you didn't want to take the test. So that's the only difference between who I am and what you are. But it's so amazing, because I've got one who he's retired since, one of my FTOs, and he's like, I never thought, you looking back all those years, that you'd be where you are. And you know, so when you hear something like that, that's really, you know, motivating. It's inspiring, you know, to hear someone encourage you like that. So sure. So you see all this different stuff going on, and you're seeing that, you know, hey, I'm not going to be bored here in this, you know, air quotes, little podunk area. This isn't, I know it's not San Diego, and it's not Southern California, but I got plenty to do here.
And you know, the cool thing about the area that I'm in is it was a lot like East County, San Diego. And you know, a lot of where I worked with the Santee station. And so it felt pretty comfortable. And you know, I graduated FTO. I became a patrol officer, and I was out on my own. I got my basic certificate, and then, you know, started to move forward in my career, and started to look at some other interests within the department.
And what were some of those interests? I mean, did you have the inkling to become a detective, or did you want to do traffic, or did you, you know, or you know what'd you have?
Yeah, so I got involved in our tactical team. It's called the IRU, the Immediate Response Unit, which is essentially our SWAT element. Right. I'd always gravitated towards that, and I became a field training officer. So those were a couple of things that were really interests of mine. And then that's kind of what got me into teaching and starting to grow and learn, and where I really started to open my eyes on a lot of different things.
So like, I guess let's expand on that. What kind of things were you getting open to that you didn't realize you didn't know?
Different, everything.
Yeah.
But perspective, right? I look back at my days as a field training officer, and you learn so much as an FTO. And when you go to that FTO school, you learn more about you than you do about how to be an FTO. And I tell my FTOs this all the time at the department. I say, you guys are probably one of the most important and critical components of our department. You are forming and shaping our new young officers on what they're going to be and how they're going to do the job. So
right.
such a critical component. And I learned there that I like to teach. I like to help others out. I like to bring things out in people where they may have stumbled, and to help their strong points become, or their weak points become their strong points, and their strong points to get better. So,
right. So you kind of hit something on the head there when you said that you learn more about yourself in doing that than you learn about how to make sure some new guys filling out a ticket correctly or something like that. You're learning how you are going to be able to develop a relationship with this person, so they can one, listen to you, where they take in what you're trying to teach them and all this different stuff, which is a huge factor is building relationships, correct?
yeah. And knowing now, I wish I knew then what I know now. And I know a lot of people say this, and I've had this conversation with Jocko and Leif and JP and those guys. And I said, man, I wish I would have had these books back in the day. It would have saved me a bunch of heartache, because along with learning that stuff, there was also like stubborn, hard-headed young Roger who was like, man, this is stupid. Why are we doing it this way? And the older guys here, the supervisors here, like, what is this dude? Here's this guy. He's young. He's from California. He has like way too much energy. He's way too eager, and they're like, beating me down with a stick, just to appease me. And it probably hindered me in a lot of things that I wanted to do.
Right.
Because I wanted to be a defensive tactics instructor with my martial arts background, because I continued to train when I moved up here. But you're 100% right about building the relationships, and that's what it's all about. And where I hurt myself was I was good at building the relationships with my peers, but I wasn't good at building relationships with my superiors. I would look at something and be like, man, this is dumb, or why are we doing it this way? We could do it this way. It's so much better. So I was kind of, drinking some Leif Babin haterade on them. Right. And I, if I would have learned to just keep my mouth shut maybe a little bit and approach it in the indirect approach, I was way too direct back in the day.
Right.
And I realized that was one of my stumbling blocks. And, I'm always looking at it and telling myself, that let's take the indirect approach. And if I would have done that back then, I would have gotten further quicker.
Right. Right. You're talking about that indirect approach, and that's so much. It's such a big thing. We don't realize that we do it. And there's that level of, I want to get things done because I see this thing needs to get done. And so and then there's that idea that, hey, that's just who I am. I'm a straight shooter. That's cool. Be a straight shooter. But that doesn't, what's the end result? You're not going to get what you need. You're not going to get what you want. You're not going to see the change that you're hoping to accomplish. And so while you're talking about taking this indirect approach and saying, and working, you were saying you're good with the people below you or on who are peers with you, but those that are above you, that's where your struggle was. And I'm assuming you were causing some waves there, huh?
Oh yeah. Probably way too many. And like I said, I wanted to be a firearms instructor. I wanted to be a defense tactics instructor. And I kept telling no. And here I am. I was teaching kids martial arts now with a coworker of mine, and we were doing Muay Thai classes. And this was pre-jiu-jitsu being a big thing. And we were doing shoot fighting,
Right.
And so we were doing this all down at his studio. He had a studio here in town, and we're like, and he was a lot the same way as me. And we would just get the roadblocks because we were too direct and, maybe too default aggressive towards people and not towards projects. That's another thing that I've learned too, be default aggressive towards things and not people. And that I look back at my past and go, okay, I really screwed up there because I was too default aggressive towards people when things would happen. And if I didn't get a position, right. So I kept putting in for those things. And And I learned, and, a bunch of those things were all humbling experiences for me. I had to learn how to, reapproach things. And I learned, a lot about myself as I grew up. And, then I got married, and, I had some mentors in the department that would, be like, "Hey, Raj, you need to chill out." Right. And one of them was, a great friend of mine, Steve Williams. And he convinced me in about '01. I was working, and so I worked. Steve was my workout partner and a great mentor of mine. We did bodybuilding together, and he was quite a bit older than me, but man, the guy was in his late 40s when I first met him, mid 40s when I first met him, and he looked like he was in his 20s. I mean, this guy was in phenomenal shape.
Wow.
Worked out. He says, he was on SWAT with me, and we worked out all the time together. And he's like, "Hey, Raj, I'm gonna go be an SRO." And I'm like, "You're gonna do what?"
The school resource officer.
You're gonna be a school. Why would you do that, dude? I'm like, that was the furthest thing from my mind. He's like, "It's a good job." So we doored up one night, and he's talking to me, and he's telling me all these things. And he actually convinced me to put in to be a school resource officer.
Oh man.
And I got married in '97. So, I talked this over with my wife. And she's like, "Yeah." And I had one daughter at the time. And so I end up getting a job as a school resource officer in a middle school. And my first week there, I'm like, "What in the hell am I doing here? I am so out of my element."
Right.
And so it took me another week, but I got my groove. And to tell you the truth, that was one of my most favorite jobs in the department. Once I found my groove and started getting things, I started an after school weightlifting program. I coached wrestling. It was an opportunity to really help mentor some kids that I still talk to today. This was
cool.
back in '01 and '02. '01 through '03, I was a school resource officer. And if I wouldn't have listened to Stevie, kind of guide and direct me to that position, I would have missed out on a lot of opportunities. And I learned about myself there that, police work ain't all about, the aspect of the job that going to bar fights or going to domestics or
driving fast, carrying a gun, blah 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 stuff.
It's just not about that. And I really grew as a person, and the more training you get too, you go to different schools and you're taught by different people, and you learn different perspectives of things. And it's like, man, this part of the job, it really makes a lot of sense. And that's where I really started to kind of understand the relationship aspect of, and working with different groups, because in the schools, you got to work with the school district, you got to work with teachers and parents, and all these different groups. And it's crazy how many different perspectives there is. And we have a Native American reservation just to the north of us too. So I had to work with members of the tribe, members of probation and parole. So I had to learn to work with a lot of different people, a lot of different perspectives. So,
right. And that's, earlier I said, school resource officer. And I didn't mean to say that if I came across that, they're less or anything like that. But like you said, it's not, there's this idea that, hey, be a cop, you're going to be booting doors, and you're going to be going to bar fights. Like you said, we're driving fast. We're doing all these, we're getting in knockdown dragouts. We're saving the day. We're, saving babies and all this different stuff. Yeah. And that's the idea. But when you're a SWAT guys and you're hardcore, whatever, like air quotes all the time, but you do that and you say, hey, I'm going to go work in a school, and I'm going to go talk to kids, and I'm going to take their, make sure they're safe, basically, is what you're doing. But in the meantime, you get to take little pittance type of reports where you're taking these little things. Hey, there's drama, there's social media drama. There's all these different things that come across, and you're like, this isn't what I signed up for, but it is what you signed up for, like you said. And then you get into the whole other thing where, like, if there is the worst case scenario of a school shooting that we've had, tons of, that way more than we ever need to have, or even would want to have, there's that you're there for that reason, just in case. And so having all this background knowledge is good, but that's not what you're going to be using that during PTA meetings. You're not going to be using, tactical maneuvers while you're having a parent teacher conference and they asked you to come in and sit in it because you've had contact with their child before.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird that you don't think of it like that, but the SRO is an absolutely, I'd say an integral part of any department. And now that you got media or other schools wanting to get rid of them, there's a lack of understanding of what having that warrior in your school is about. It's so important.
Well, and the thing too is that, I mean, like I said, I still talk to some of these, well, they're men and women now, and they have kids of their own, but they still call me Officer Shei from way back in the day. And, it's like, hey, remember, and we do a cool thing here. We do what's called the summer program. And we took kids whitewater rafting and scuba diving and rock climbing and mountain biking. And we did community cleanups, and we did service projects and stuff. So, and they remember the stuff that we did during the summertime. And it's just, you build those relationships at such a young age, and it's an opportunity for kids to see, like me outside my uniform. Hey, right. I'm just a guy that puts my shorts on one leg at a time, and I'm just, we're police officers are just like anybody else. They have feelings, and they have emotions, and we're real people, and it really gets a chance for them to see you like that, especially like when I had my after school weightlifting program, and I coached wrestling, things like that. Those were all really good events where the kids could get to know me, and you build those relationships starting at that young age. And then you start to build relationships with parents and teachers. And it really taught me, I'm so glad I did it, because it really taught me how to do the job from a different perspective and a different angle. And it really humbled me too, because it changed my perspective. I look back at it now and yeah. And I really thank Stevie for that opportunity to,
right.
And he taught me to look at things. He was always there to teach me to look at things from a different perspective. And, I was blessed to have him in my life. So,
yeah. And that's cool, because a lot of times, you don't even realize the mentors you have until afterwards. And you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, but no. And it's great that you have that thing where you were able to click and come together with him, and he was able to speak into your life because he developed that relationship with you, and vice versa, and so you become
you asked me a question earlier about, me as a young officer, like, who are you? A lot of who I am was a lot of Steve Williams in me. So,
so we're going to hear more about Steve Williams, I'm guessing that.
Yeah. And today's kind of it's kind of ironic that we're here talking about him, because he passed away in 2005 in a boat crash today.
Oh man.
So it's kind of a I believe everything happens for a reason. Yeah. I don't believe in coincidences in life. And as I'm speaking here, one of our mutual friends just sent me a text about him. So, this is how big of an impact this guy had on people's lives. So
yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, let's just talk him up then. I'm all for that then. That's great.
Yeah. So
like you said, you wouldn't be who you are or where you are if it wasn't for him, huh?
Yeah, he was a big influence of young Raj in the Pocateel Police Department. He was always the guy that when I was, this is dumb, this is stupid, he'd be like, Raj, take a breath, right? He was essentially telling me to detach.
Yeah.
right? Before I knew who Jocko was, right? I mean, he was like my inner voice, like, hey,
Right.
Raj, you getting excited, you getting, you know, and he was always there to kind of settle me down. And he always was in the community a lot. He taught me about building relationships at a young age and how
Hmm.
important it was. And everybody knew Stevie. Everybody in our community knew him. And people that had the opportunity to know him, when you left a meeting with him or being around him, you left with a smile on your face and you left a better person. So
Right.
that's kind of the guy who he was, and he had such a big impact on people. I mean, uh, he was a big workout buff, and I mean, at 50 years old, he's winning bodybuilding competitions. So the
That's
guy
cool.
guy's
Yeah.
a freak. And we got him pictures of him all over our department, and I've got a street sign with his badge number above our weight room, because he kind of got it started. So everybody, remembers him when they go into our weight room. So that's
That's
something
cool.
that I always want to keep here at our department, is our legacy and where we came from. So
Right. I heard something recently that it was somebody's talking about uh, Winston Churchill, and they said that there's a difference between Winston Churchill and Adolf Hitler. And so they would say that, if you spoke with, and they were talking to people who had spoken with both of them after being in meetings with them. With Hitler, you felt when you left that guy could accomplish anything, and he was able to go and can go accomplish anything. That was great, whatever. We all know what he went and accomplished. He could have done anything, and he decided to do what he did. Nevertheless, with Winston Churchill, they said when you got done with a meeting, you thought you could go accomplish anything, because his deal was, I'm not giving to myself. I'm going to give in. I'm going to pour into you, and I'm going to encourage you and inspire you, so you go out and do stuff. And I'm not going to be like this other person who lets you know that he can do anything. Instead, he's in Winston Churchill's direction of pushing other people to become greater. And that sounds like Steve Williams just
yeah,
wants to go make other people better.
yeah, yeah. And he was a great guy. And like I said, I got me to be a school resource officer. He's my wingman on SWAT. We worked patrol together, and then as a resource officers together.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was a resource officer, I ended up, and I actually found out that being a school resource officer was the best thing that I could do to actually train how to be a detective, because right, you keep your own cases, you work your own cases.
Yeah.
When you go on vacation and um, you come back and your work's still on your desk, there's no one to pick up the slack for you.
Right.
You gotta take care of all that stuff. So I ended up getting promoted out of school resource. I was a patrol corporal / detective. So I worked patrol corporal for a couple years, and then I got moved to detectives for a couple years. So,
And that's pretty cool. And I'm assuming you start learning about yourself as you start going through various cases and other things. But then you start, as you're talking about your corporal, you had to start developing a little bit of leadership aside
yeah,
from anything you developed while you were FTO. But now you're dealing with this leadership portion in your corporal side,
yeah,
because that's basically in civilian world an assistant manager, right?
yeah. You're that basic first line supervisor.
Uh-huh. Right. And so then by doing that, and then you were able to obviously take some stuff, go into detectives. And that was, did you enjoy detective time?
Yeah, I did. We worked some we had a pretty bad homicide here when I was in detectives, and it made national news media. There's some documentaries out there on it, but we had a class, two classmates. They stabbed their classmate to death here, and we came together. I mean, essentially, we did cover move. We followed the laws of combat, which is why we were successful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, we were able to find these two kids within 48 hours and get them in custody. And thank goodness that we did, because they had a list of people they were going to kill, and I'm convinced they would have gone into one of our high schools and done a school shooting.
Wow.
And we prevented that. And we came together as the county, the state, and our city, and we worked together, and there was no boundaries. And, we were one team, and we had one mission, and we kept things simple. We used prioritize and execute and decentralized command. And because we did those things, we were, like I said, we were successful. So.
Right. That's cool. Cause you, as you're going through that stuff, and you don't get those cases all the time, but when something like that big is coming up, and you essentially saved the lives of hundreds of people, of completely innocent people. I mean, just because they played too many video games, or they had some preconceived idea that they were wronged, or whatever the case is. I don't know these guys' story, but they didn't have any discipline in their life at some point to think that, hey, I can do whatever I want. I don't have any boundaries. And the only thing stopping me is, that cop over there with a gun. Well, there's a number of us, because we're a team, and we're going to go in and we're going to find you, and we're going to legally get you put in a place where you can get some help, or you can't hurt anybody again.
Yeah. And they're in prison to this day. So
yeah, and that's so scary to know. We've had near incidents now like that here where I live, and it's just we were able to stop things before they got worse. And unfortunately, those guys on your case, they did hurt some people before they got caught. So but so you go through detectives, and you go through corporal, and you're like, I want to do more, or did you just say I'm good here?
No, and I had this conversation with my wife when I started to advance. I said, if I retire as a sergeant, I'll be good. Right. Like, that was my goal, was like to get to be a sergeant. And I'm like, okay, if I could be a sergeant, I'm good to go. And so I end up testing for sergeant, and, I go through a little bit of adversity there, but I get promoted to sergeant. And, after having a few years in detectives, and then on top of having a few years as patrol corporal under my belt, and I end up in that role.
That's cool. And as a sergeant, you're running a shift, you're in charge of a number of guys.
Go ahead.
And then you get to learn about yourself all over again.
Yeah. So some lessons learned as a sergeant. I'm in there, and I'm like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Right. I was like hard charger, and I was a younger sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in there, and I'm cranking out evaluations, and I'm looking over at this older sergeant, and I'm like, hey, you got all your evals done? And he's looking at me, he's like, yeah. I'm like, how did you do that? I'm like, I'm in lockdown mode here working on these evals. He goes, I just open one up at the beginning of the shift, and I just do it with them. I go over stuff with them once a week. And I'm like, man, that's a great idea. So I stole that from him, and do it to this day, where you're constantly, documenting things. So I learned how to do some things differently at a young age. And then I'm like, hey, all these guys, they need to conform to what I want. And I was like, they're going to conform to me. Right. And it's like, yeah, wrong. So I learned that I needed to change and maybe approach things from their perspective, their personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And at that young age as a sergeant, I had to learn about different personalities and how to handle those. So I started to learn I had to approach things differently with different people. And that's where I really started to learn the indirect approach. And I was I had the opportunity to start teaching some classes, some leadership classes with Cindy Malm all over Utah and all over Idaho. And part of that class was we did this little personality breakdown. And it's like, hey, if you're this group, you're like the direct group. You like to be told you're doing it wrong and here's how you fix it. But 3 out of the 4 personalities, you had to handle them in a more indirect fashion.
Mm.
So I had to learn I learned how to do that. And as I did that, I found I was more successful. When I went in like a bull in a china shop at the beginning, I wasn't as successful. But
Right.
when I started to like change and go, hey, I noticed this about you, and went about the more indirect approach, right? I became more successful. I'm like, oh, okay, note to self, that's working, right?
Right. Right. And so that's cool. That's cool because you don't, if you're open enough that you can sit there and say, oh, hey, I'm doing this wrong, or I'm looking at myself and I'm telling myself I'm doing it wrong. You need to fix it. It's easy for us to tell ourselves that, but for somebody else to tell me, hey, who are you to tell me? You don't know anything about me. Well, I do, because I'm paying attention to you, and I'm interested in helping develop you. And I'm interested in seeing you become more who you are. So if, if you adjust the way that you think and how you're going to approach somebody. And I think that's a very difficult thing to do, because it's so easy for us to be, I just need to go tell them that 2 + 2 is 4, but or whatever the case is, I just need to tell them, as opposed to, okay, how do I say this to them without busting in there and offending them, upsetting them, making them think I'm attacking them, whatever these things are. And then you can adjust how you develop that relationship with that person.
Yeah. And as I would talk these things out, and my wife would really be like the one telling me, hey, you know what, try it this way or try it that way, and
Right.
I'm blessed to have her in my life because, she's been a good sounding board when
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to do it this way. And she's like, I don't think that's a good idea. Right. And, and that now I've got Stevie whispering in my ear, he's always whispering in my ear.
Right.
But,
Right.
but as I continue to move forward, I kind of looked at it and go, okay, why is this working? Why is this not working? And as a sergeant, but by now, right, I'm a defensive tactics instructor. I did become a defensive tactics instructor. I did become a firearms instructor.
Uh-huh.
I'm an assistant team leader on SWAT. I brought explosive breaching into Pocatello. So I was able to overcome some of those things that I failed earlier because I changed my approach, and now I'm successful. Now I became an academy instructor. I'm teaching at Idaho Post over Meridian. I've been teaching up at Idaho State University as
Mm-hmm.
an instructor in multiple disciplines, patrol procedures, and I got very involved in that. And I learned so much from teaching and
Yeah.
getting critiques as a teacher. So as I went down to Utah, I would get these feedback forms, and I'd be like, and I'd look at them and went, okay, I did that. And I would change my approach based off those feedback forms that I got.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah. Those feedback forms are incredibly important. And yeah, I do. And I know you guys do this too. You guys have your Citizens Public Safety Academy class sort of
yep,
thing.
yep.
And we have one too. And I'm our coordinator for that. And I'll fill those, and I'll always print those out, and I'll get them people. The students I always have to remind them, hey, fill this out, please. Oh yeah. And I got a stack. I forgot. I got to do a couple past classes. I'm like, oh, come on. But I give them to some of the instructors. They're like, oh, okay, good. That's nice. Oh, I can't believe somebody thinks I don't talk loud enough or whatever. But then others are like, they're just wanting to soak up. I want to know what I can do better. I want to know. And I have one guy who is one of our instructors, and he is asking for those things that night. And I said, they haven't filled them out yet. They just got them. He goes, can you get them to me as soon as you get them? Yeah, I will. I promise. And so with him, I'll give him the eval sheet, and he's looking at it, and he's like, okay. Oh, they didn't like that. Oh, then I will change that. And he'll almost go right back into his PowerPoint right then. I said, you're not going to deliver this for another year. He goes, yeah, but I'm getting it ready now. And this guy, he's that mindset, and which is incredibly cool for him. And I love him having being an instructor for us in one of our classes. But that's the idea, is you learn so much by teaching others, and then you learn by what their critique is and how, if you can see that they're learning something and you're seeing how that they're able to develop it, you're able to then say, okay, then I taught that right. Or if they're not getting it, that's where you can go back and say, okay, what did I not, I obviously didn't teach the correct way. What did I miss in, what didn't you understand of what I was saying, or whatever the case would be, as opposed to, and this is just another leadership thing where you say, hey, what did I do wrong? How can I teach you better? And then that person can come back and say, they see that you're humble and you're able to accept criticism and feedback, as opposed to thinking you're all knowing and because you have all these instructor tabs after your name. They know that you don't think of yourself that highly.
Yeah. Failure in things seems to be a good teacher. It humbles you. And as I look at the things that I wasn't successful on earlier, I never gave up on things that I wanted to do. And I guess that's a good point that you bring up is, if I could tell anybody that's getting into the game or wanting to get into a leadership position, that one of the most important thing you can do is be humble,
right?
And listen to others. And, cause like in your mind, right, as an instructor, you think it's like, oh yeah, I killed it. Right. I crushed it today. And you get your feedback form and it's like, it's not as good as you think you are. You're never as good as you think you are. Right.
Right.
So you get that feedback form and it's like, okay, I need to change something because I'm thinking I'm this way, but I'm being perceived another way. Is there something how am I being perceived and what do I need to adjust? And so I always look at it that way. And I guess in my mind, I when I teach every class or I give a presentation or I do something, I'm always thinking I need to give more. And I need to be better, or I need to work harder. And that kind of keeps me moving forward and, not getting comfortable or complacent. I think that when you get comfortable or complacent in things, then you kind of back off and let things slack. So I've always got that in the back of my mind. Like, it's like, I'm always trying out for my job. Right. So,
yes. Yeah.
So that kind of keeps me going. And, as a sergeant, I ended up becoming our training sergeant, and I actually revamped our training program and consolidated a lot of things and got our department on track, because we were at a stage where we had some guys that weren't getting a lot of training, and then what I did is developed a training matrix. So and a training assessment program. We do a training needs assessment every year now. And when we did that, we started to train a lot more. And now we're the highest trained department in the state. So.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. I would be interesting to look at, to see that matrix and see,
Sure.
I think, no, I was going to say, I think you sent me something, but I don't remember if that was it, but nevertheless, that would be really cool to see. So
I'll send you everything I got. I got no secrets. I mean, if it's something that's worked for us, I'll send it to whoever and just say, hey, look, you know what? You slice it, dice it, change it up for you, for your department, what makes it work for you. And, we trained a lot of in-house instructors, and we got our programs going, and now we got different guys running these different programs. And, so it's been real successful. We've got a lot of guys that do a lot of things. A lot of our instructors now teach at the academies, both at Idaho State University and over in Meridian. So
that's cool. So you're the training sergeant, and your whole intent, when you, like you said, you told your wife, I'm going to retire as a sergeant, but obviously that didn't happen.
No. Yeah.
Where did that road kind of
I was just like, off? Well, so it's like, so as a sergeant, especially a training sergeant, so like I start to get to learn the inner workings of the department. And it was kind of a position that my chief then said, I want you to do this position. I was really liking patrol. I was really liking being a patrol sergeant. And I was just like, but once again, it was kind of like in the SRO thing, right? Once I got into it and I found my groove, and it was like, okay, here's my gig as this. My job is to make sure that these guys have all the tools that they need to be successful, to be safe out on the street. And when I started to do that, and then I started to see some leadership gaps in the department, like going, okay, man, I'd really like to have some more influence on how we do this.
Yeah.
And in order for me to have a little more influence, I got to get promoted.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so it's like, I looked at it too, going, okay, here's the thing. Do I really want to be working for this guy when I'm going to be here for quite a long time. So do I end up wanting to work for some of these other people, or do I want to, have less influence, or do I want to have the same amount of influence as a sergeant? And not saying there's anything wrong with that, because we have a guy right now, he's our narcotics sergeant. He has no ambitions to be a lieutenant. And this guy freaking rocks it. He goes out there and he shakes the trees and he gets pounds of meth. I mean, he does his job and he does it well. Yeah. And there some people just don't have any ambitions on that. I looked at it and went, okay, I want to have a little more influence in this department. I want to be able to make some changes. And in order for me to do that, I got to promote.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. And I noticed that same thing, that I get you to get promoted. It wasn't so I can have power and all this different stuff. It was so you can have a little more, you can make some change. You can help, and you can still do stuff as a line level guy. You can help make change. You can do all this different stuff, lead up the chain of command, but there's still a level that you have more say, that you can actually say, yes, let's implement that, because you have a little more authority within your department or wherever.
And I saw that too. I was our union president for a couple of years. I was our FOP president for several years. I've actively been involved in FOP and our union. And I saw that as the union president. And so I kind of had a little more insight in things as that. I had to look at the bigger picture of things, had to look at like everybody versus just patrol or just the division I was in. So that kind of helped me too a little bit going. And then I started to get exposed to a lot more training, going other places and seeing how other agencies functioned and learning not to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Because everybody's used to a certain way, and they say, well, we're going to go with an octagonal wheel now. And now the ride's rough, Yeah. So you put in for lieutenant. Obviously, you got it.
Yeah. I became a lieutenant, and I was back over in patrol, working patrol shifts, and I love that job. It was a good job. I had a chance to really have an influence over the entire shift I was on. It was like we tried some different things, and we had fun, and we did the job and let guys start to do their job. And I don't care how. And I learned this as a sergeant. Hey, I don't care how you get from point A to point B, so long that you're safe, you're legal, you're ethical, you're doing your best to follow policies and procedures. I don't want you guys to be me. I want you guys to be you. And I want you to go out and do the job the best that you can and how you can do it. And I've always had that philosophy. And I look back and I go, oh, hey, that's decentralized command, right? Here's your guidelines to operate, and I'll go do it. I didn't realize I was doing that. I didn't have a name for it till I got introduced to Jocko and extreme ownership and that stuff. So,
So and obviously the guys took to it like a fish out of water, or a fish in water.
Yeah. We did some competitions and stuff. I'd hang some sticky notes over town, because guys were like, check beat, to check their beat. And I don't want to check beat. I'm not a security guard. Right. And so I said, hey, I just went about it a different approach. I went about it with an indirect approach, hung up some sticky notes on businesses that I know have been burglarized, that are burglaries that I've taken back in the day. I said, hey, whoever finds this, get the box of ammo. And so guys would go out and actually look for these these sticky notes, but as they were looking for the sticky notes, they're filling out FI cards, they're making traffic stops, they're finding stuff.
Right. They're
It's
getting
like,
people moving along, or whatever the case is, or they're finding the actual an open door.
yeah.
And so that would have not have been found, especially on night shift. It wouldn't have been found until the folks came in the next day. And if
Yep.
it's a weekend where business, isn't open, on a Sunday or whatever, now you're not there until Monday. And so how long has somebody been in there, or how long has that place been sitting open? And yeah, and that's our ultimate goal, is to make sure people are safe and their property is safe. And
Yep.
I think there are some guys that kind of sometimes forget that my job is, I didn't just go arrest people. Well, yeah, that is true. We get to do that. But I think there's a level where we have to make sure people have their stuff, and they get to use it, and they get to live their life and enjoy where they're at. Because if they don't enjoy where they're at, they're going to go somewhere else to do that. And you're not going to have much of a community or where you're at. You're going to.
Well, and that goes back to like our mission statement is very simple here. It's community commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is we're going to be visible, we're going to be approachable, but we're going to let people know that crime's not acceptable in our community. If you commit a crime in our town, you're going to be held accountable. But at the end of the day, right, it's all about building relationships with your community and taking ownership with your community. And I say this all the time to the community when I go out and engage them, or the officers or our new recruits, say that when you're in our town and people see a police officer, a member of the police department, whether it's dispatch or our stenographers, records clerks, sworn officers, I just don't want them saying there's a member of the police department. I want them saying that's my member of the police department.
Right.
And
Right.
You're 100% right and spot on. It's not about just, the things that you see in TV, that are the exciting part of the job. It's about all the stuff, the boring stuff behind the scenes that builds those relationships up, that lets you do those things, that enable you to go out and do those other things because your community trusts you. And that goes like into my department expectations and a lot of other, leadership principles that we've enacted here. But it all goes to that mission. Like, what's our mission, right? And our driving force as first responders, and that's the preservation of human life. And if you're in this job, you're doing this, you're listening to this somewhere out there, that don't ever forget that is our mission, is the preservation of human life, and everything that we do, that's the end result. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because what are we on this planet for? We're on this planet for people. Yep. I mean, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, that our ultimate goal, I mean, yes, we have to serve people, and we have to be with people. You have to spend life with people. You can go be a hermit up in the mountains. That's fine. But what is, I mean, other than just taking care of yourself and make sure you have enough to eat and you're warm, what else are you doing? What are you doing for this world and for the society that you live in? You have your kids, you have your family, you have your wife, you have your whatever, your spouse. You have all those people, and you go to work so you can put food on the table. You go to work, and so if you find a job that now you're serving by serving, I'm serving food to my kids, but I'm also serving my public or my society or whatever. So now I have this other thing, and that's why I think we're on this planet, is for other people. We're not on here for ourselves, because if we're here for ourselves only, everybody would be a billionaire, because that's all they would care about. And there are a number of people who all they care about is this selfish stuff. Unfortunately, that's what drug addicts are. I think they're just selfish because that's all they want to do, is get the next fix, the next hit, and then they have to then prove to everybody in which they're getting their hit or their fix from that they're not a punk and they're not weak or whatever, so they don't get taken advantage of when they're unconscious from their stuff or whatever the case is. So I think there's selfishness there. I think there's selfishness in people who unfortunately want to commit suicide. They're not thinking of everybody else. They're thinking of themselves and how bad they feel. The minute you get past that and you say, I want to serve other people, and I want to do something for other people, and I want to make sure that somebody else is taken care of, that's when you start realizing that why we're here on this planet makes the difference in how we do what we do. Not just us as police officers, but people in general. I mean, no matter what you do, whether you're a plumber or a mill worker, doesn't matter. Your job is serving other people. And then if you can just speak in other people's lives in the process, that servanthood will make you feel better. And it's amazing what serving somebody else will actually do for you, for your mind, for your endorphins, for your personal satisfaction and growth.
Yeah, I have a firm belief that, it says when you're in the service of your fellow man, you're in the service of your God. So,
yeah,
and having, that as a good foundation and that mindset, I always looking for opportunities to serve. That's you're spot on when you're saying that, talking about service and, helping others out. That's why at the end of the day, that's why we got into this job. And that's why we did this, is because, when the bell rings, right. And I always go back to Isaiah 6:8, and it says, I looked at it and it say, who shall I send? And I said, here I am, send me. And, and that's, we chose to do this. We didn't get drafted, right? I chose to be a police officer in my community. I chose to get promoted up to the ranks all the way to chief. Mm-hmm. I knew what I got into. It's like people say, oh man, it's rough out there with the media. I said, I know, but I knew what I signed up for getting into it. I knew there was going to be adversity. I knew there was going to be challenges. I knew there was going to be rough spots. But I signed up for this, and I did it because every day my job, I got a saying on the outside of my wall. Hold on a second.
Okay.
She got it. Okay. Good to go. I got a saying on the outside of my wall, and I look at it every day I go out, and it says, it's all on you, but it's not about you. Right. And I see that every day to remind me that everything I do, every action I take, has an impact on the men and women that work at this department, the men and women that live in our community, mm-hmm. and law enforcement as a whole, right? We don't have the luxury of saying, well, it's just Pocatello Police, or it's LAPD, or it's San Diego County, or it's Cocoa Beach PD.
Right.
Because the way that our society sees us nowadays, if I make a mistake, then you make a mistake. Uh-huh. And we saw what the actions of one person did, it took us into a tailspin, and so I got that saying outside my wall. I heard JP say that on one of our, JP Donnell, he said that on one of our Zoom calls. And I'm like, I love that saying so much, I put it up on my wall.
Yeah. And what does that again? Say it one more time.
It's all on you, but it's not about you.
Right. And see that, and that's cool, because we don't think about that all the time. We just think about, it is about me. And because we're always thinking about number one. Of course we are. That's when you get hungry, who you care about feeding mostly, yourself, whatever the case is. But when you put that aside and you say, it's not all about me, and my job is everything in my world, I'm 100% responsible for, but it's not my world's not about me. It's me for everybody else, and it's about everybody else. And so that's why I do what I do. And you can take that as from a family thing. It's all about you. You make sure that you do what you need to do, because if you don't, then the kids don't eat. They don't have Christmas. They don't have the school clothes they need. They don't have the education they need. You don't have, good memories. You don't have growth in your family. You don't see this, it's just this exponential thing that you forget about. And so, yes, it's not all about you, but it is, you have to do it. You have to be the one that says, it's my world. I'm responsible for it. And I'm going to make sure that I do everything I can to make it. Now, there's things going to be out of your control, like, weather or whatever. But we all know that if you think that weather might be an issue because you can't control it, then you need to prepare for that weather, something along those lines.
So, pack a raincoat.
Yep.
Right. Bring an umbrella. Right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, and, being a father, I think it changed a lot of my perspective on things, especially I got 3 daughters. So
Mhm.
that really, that changed my perspective on a lot of things too. So, people ask me like, what keeps you humble? My kids keep me humble, right? My
Right.
family keeps me humble. And everything I do is for those guys. It's just, it keeps you grounded as a person, right? I
Yeah.
think religion is important in people's lives. I had a kid ask me a question. I was teaching up at the ISU Academy, the police academy up there, and he asked me a question. He says, how have you dealt with all the nasty stuff? Because I was telling some stories about some bad stuff.
Right.
How do you deal with all that bad stuff and then be able to go and function, like be a dad and go to church and go out and just be normal? And I said, that's a great question.
Right.
And because like we're like this soda bottle, right?
Mhm.
And what happens when you shake that soda bottle and you just kind of crack it just a little bit, right? It explodes.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to let the pressure out. So I kind of use that analogy and I said, here's my advice to you. Believe in something.
Mhm.
I don't care what it is, but have a good foundation of something you believe in, whatever religion you want to be, or whether you don't have a religion, but believe in something.
Right. Right.
Believe that there's more to life than just this.
Yeah. Because eventually it's all gonna go away. We know people who are no longer with us, and
Yes.
you take Steve, for example,
Yep.
and he's there. There's people that are, where are they at now? We have to believe that there's something more, and we're doing this for more than just us. Because
Sure.
if it's just us and we're making the rules, why do they have to be good? Why can't I just go out and hurt people and do bad things?
Do whatever I want to do. And
Yeah.
that kind of takes me back to those kids on that homicide that I talked about. That was
Mhm.
one of their things. They actually sat in the parking lot of my church, the church building that I go to.
Mhm.
And they recorded a video. They were doing like a documentary of these things they were doing. And they said, God like Santa Claus, and he's just there to keep us from doing the things that we want to do. So if we want to go out and kill somebody, we should be able to do that. That's kind of what these kids believed in. And it's a scary mindset, right? Because
Yeah.
they actually they actually killed one girl. But to have that mindset that they should just be able to go and do that because they feel that's their emotions.
Right.
And I mean, like I said, it's just, but it goes back to the advice I gave that young man was believe in something.
Mhm.
And I think if you do that, especially because as a first responder, whether you're police, your fire, your ambulance, you're going to see horrific things that most people should not see. I think that they were talking about, they were talking about trauma at the FBI National Academy conference that I went to. And we see, like, most people will see maybe 3 or 4 traumatic incidents their life.
Mhm.
I mean, we're dealing with like,
Oh yeah.
30 a year, right? We're going to
Yeah.
go on hundreds of these things depending on how long your career is and where you work at. You're going to see all these traumatic incidents, and which I'm a firm believer in how big mental health is in law enforcement. That it's or in first responders.
Yeah.
Let's not forget our firefighter brothers and sisters out there and our EMS responders. They're going to see the same things. And I just, look at that. And that goes back to saying, okay, why did I get promoted? Because I wanted to have a bigger influence on being able to take care of my people.
Right.
That was the driving force behind wanting to be a captain, and then the deputy chief, and then the chief, and doing those things, because now I have, the influence where I can go in and say, okay, you guys want to do this. You think this is important. Let's find a way to get it done.
Right. Right. And and I think that that's something that we forget, that it has to start with somebody. Somebody has to say, you know what, I'm going to speak into this person's life, and I'm going to let them know. So like, you take your kids, for example, you're providing discipline for them. And it's not always spankings or whatever, but it's those boundaries that we were talking about before, where it's like bumpers in the bumper lane when you have little kids and they're bowling,
Yeah.
you're the bumpers. This is the direction you can go. You can go anywhere you want into it, but you can't go past these things. And so you're just there to keep them kind of in their lane.
Yeah.
But and there's obviously, you take those two kids you're talking about, they obviously didn't have somebody coming alongside them and giving them these boundaries, telling them that there's right and wrong, there's good and bad, and you cannot do this, because if you do, this is the sort of thing. And I talk about it all the time, the dropping the pebble in a pond, the ripples, where do those ripples go? They go all the way. They don't stop until something else, and they'll lap up on the shore. And that's just, we don't think about that. So it takes people to come alongside somebody. That's why the family dynamic is so important. And the fact that they want to, that there are people that want to get rid of this mother and father dynamic that a family needs to have is so outrageous, because it's needed. It's an absolute necessity that they're there to have guidance for those kids. Otherwise, kids are just going to go do whatever. And I remember talking to a girl one time, and I was talking to, I had her in the back of my car. I was taking her to jail, and some song came on the radio, and it had some questionable lyrics in there. And I said, oh yeah, I saw this video where this kid was singing this at a wedding or something like that. And everybody's around laughing. And the kid was maybe, 6 or something. And the girl goes, so what's the big deal with that? I said, it's the kid was 6. She goes, well, they're going to be exposed to it eventually. So what's the difference? The difference is he's not there. His mind isn't formed to know right from wrong. And so if you keep telling him wrong is right, this is what's going to happen. You're going to turn into kids who get those inklings to go hurt people or go do things they shouldn't do because they don't think there's any boundaries.
Yeah. Who do you want raising your kids? Do you want the media raising your kids, or what do you want raising your children and your young people and forming them?
Right.
So, it goes back to our mission statement of community commitment and why we do what we do, especially like with that youth summer component program that we still do to this day, is that, sometimes these youth don't have that. So who do they look up to? They look up to their school resource officer, or they look up to, a member of their faith, or a positive male role model or positive female role model in their lives. So, so that's the thing is that when I look at, like you talked about serving and service and things like that, those are all important things. One of the things I enjoy doing is I spend a lot of time with the student athletes here at Idaho State University. And I just did a workout with them, and I do a talk with them when they just started their fall camp. But I'm pretty involved with these young men. I take them to the range. We go shooting. We do a lot of community projects together, and that's building that relationship with them. But some of these young men, they've grown up, and they're coming here from different communities, and they're looking for that leadership.
Right.
They're looking for someone to fill that gap, and they've got coaches, and they're structured, but sometimes outside the coach, and sometimes these young men that have come here haven't had a positive relationship with, or a positive interaction with, law enforcement. And so they see me, and it's like, I'm wearing their gear and I'm working out with them.
Yeah.
And I just turned 49, and they'll look at me and go, oh crap, what has Chief got for us now? Right. I mean, what kind of a workout does he have for us now? And it's some nasty circuit that I picked up somewhere, or something that, but when they see me working out with them, I don't become a police officer. I become one of them.
Right. And it's funny, having that outside influence where you can say, hey, I'm not a cop. And they're so worried, oh, the cops want to talk to me. No, we're not always on duty. We like to do other things. And I remember I was working in a small town, and this kid, he would always go down, walking up and down the street, going to market, whatever. And he had just super long hair, and he always had his headphones in, and he's just banging his head. He was listening to something. Obviously, I mean, this guy was what would you would consider a metalhead, and he's just always just rocking his head back and forth. His hair's always flying, and this kid, but he wouldn't give me I would say, I see him at the store or whatever. Hey, how's it going? He's like, hey, what's up? He'd just be gruff. He'd cops or whatever. And so I would see him every once in a while, and he would see me, but he wouldn't have anything to do with me because I'm the cops. Right. Well, I had my son, I was taking him to his first concert, and we went and saw Megadeth, and we were there, and I don't know, my son was 16 or something like that. And we're just this crowd of people, and I obviously, nobody knows I'm a cop or whatever, but I'm there, and I bump into this kid who was always rocking, down the street. And I said, hey, how's it going? He's like, how do I know you? And I mean, the music's just blaring and the whole thing. And I said, I'm a cop, and he's like, oh my gosh, you're here. And so it just blew his mind that he was there. And by the end of the night, this guy's got his arm around me, and he's around my shoulder, and he's just like, oh my God. And he was so excited that a cop was a regular guy. He thought that was the coolest thing. And so, but he wasn't, obviously he was being cool about it. He wasn't going to tell anybody he was standing next to a cop or had his arm on a cop or whatever. But the funny thing is that idea that we're normal people and we want to go do normal things that's how you develop those relationships with people who, like you said, have had maybe negative interactions with police officers or whatever the case is, that they think that we're just there to get them in trouble, when that's not the case. We're here to live life with you and do that sort of thing.
Yeah. Any opportunity I have to change someone's perspective. Right. And I love it when, Jocko and those guys talk about leadership capital.
Uh-huh.
I mean, every time I do something, I look at building leadership capital, whether that's with my community or with the men and women here at the department, or whether that's wherever I go. I want to leave a conversation with more capital than I came in with. And then I'm frugal about spending it.
Right.
And we've instilled that kind of philosophy here at the department, where we're always looking for opportunities to build leadership capital. And like I said, why did I want to do things, get promoted? Like I said, have more influence to go out and build leadership capital with people. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we do a lot of good things here at our department. Last year we did a turkey fundraiser called Give the Cops the Bird.
Yeah.
And we raised $10,000 for the food bank and 202 turkeys.
Wow.
And then I made my staff, they hated me for this, but my captains and above, my 3 captains, deputy chief, well, he was out when this happened, and myself, we ended up doing 202 burpees. We did a burpee for every turkey.
That's pretty cool.
That our people brought in. So that kind of urged the guys to bring in some turkeys.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, someone matched the $10,000. So we ended up raising 20 grand for the food bank, and 202 turkeys. We do handcuff hunger, for fundraiser for the food bank. We partner with local businesses, Secret Santa, Shop with a Cop. We have our summer program. We do the jailbreak run with Gold's Gym. We do a lot of those different activities. We're going to be cooking for the football team. We already cooked for them once. We'll be at the Greek Food Festival here coming up. We have a back to school backpack event we're going to be at next Saturday. Farmers markets. I mean, our guys are always out doing things. Some of our guys were at the farmers market doing some kids activity. They're always looking for opportunities to build that leadership capital with the community.
Right.
And so they can see that aspect that you were talking about. Hey, we're just normal people, right? Mm-hmm. And some of our guys are, they're pretty talented, and they're like, oh, I never thought that he could do that, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, there's guys that we have one guy he's a really good singer, and he'll go and he'll sing at the national anthem at football games, at the high school football games and stuff like that. And he'll do it in uniform. And so people are like, yeah, that's cool. There's always something like that, but when you do stuff like that, you're, like you said, you're building that capital, but you're you're also building that relationship. So people
Yeah.
see that you're that way. So when you're responding to their house because of their worst day of their life, they can trust you. They can rely on you. They know that you're putting relief into their heart, that they're safe, because this guy who I've talked with, who is a human, is now here, and he just saved my life, or he's working this thing to make sure that I can get back to my normal that I like to live. And this one or two major incident in my life that I'm going to visit is here, and I don't want to be here anymore. And this guy is going to save me, or this girl is going to save me and get me out of this. And so
Yeah.
that relationship. Yeah.
Yep. And that leadership capital, we were talking about that. It's trust equals relationships. You build trust with your community, and that equals relationships, and relationships equals leadership capital.
Yeah.
So I've one of my department expectations is to protect the gift. That's my 5th department expectation. And when I talk about protecting the gift, I talk about that leadership capital and building that trust with the relationship. I tell the officers, I constantly remind them about this. When we go somewhere and we start to talk, people are going to shut up and listen to us. Amazing things going to happen. People are going to pay attention to what you have to say.
Right.
And it's not because of anything that maybe that particular officer or that particular member of the department has done. It's because they respect the position that you're in, and it's what those before us have done to build that trust up. So we have like this big reservoir of trust with our community, and the last thing we want to do is violate that trust or that gift that we've been given of that leadership capital. We don't want to empty the bank, because one bad incident can cause a huge withdrawal. So we always got to be very protective of that gift of trust that we've been given by our community. Because you go all the way back to the basics of police work of Sir Robert Peel, right?
Yeah,
and
1866, right?
It's like 1820. I mean, it's back in the day.
Yeah.
And you look at that and go, well, what can we do to keep that trust, right? How do we keep those things? And you can't go out and do those bad things that violate the trust of your community, because you'll lose that.
Right. Because the reason we have the power we have is because the community lets us have it.
Correct. That's 100. And I think we forget that I think we forget that as law enforcement a lot of times. The reason we're here is because of this trust that they're allowing us to do this. I mean, because when you look at it, my town's roughly 60,000 people. I've got 97 sworn. There is no way that if everybody decided to do something, that there's no way that the 97 sworn officers here could contain 60,000 people.
Right.
And it's that way across the country.
Right. Because let's just break it down. When you sit there and you say, okay, let's say all 60,000 people are up in arms and revolting or whatever, or the city decides to come uncorked. Now we got to get all 97 guys back in. But wait a minute. Some of them just got off working a 12-hour shift, or some of them are away out of town. So you're not even getting all 97. They might be on vacation, maybe off training, or you have the people who are there who are wanting to make sure that things are taken care of. And we have the same issue here where I'm at. We have to trust them, and they have to trust us, and it has to work both ways. And because we wouldn't have it if they didn't want us to have it, but there are a number more people want us to have the authority or ability to do our job than people that don't want us to do it. And we forget about that.
Well, and it's 1829 actually, and it's Sir Robert Peel's 9 policing principles. And those, when you look at the fundamentals of there, and you keep it simple. See, if you're simple, clear, and concise, right? And you look at those things and go, these things work then, they're going to work now.
Exactly.
And we get into the weeds on things, and we get too complex. And, if we look back at those basic fundamentals and we practice the fundamentals, it's like, right. It's kind of thinking like advanced SWAT tactics, right? I want the advanced stuff. I want the advanced firearms. Well, I can't. What's advanced? It's just a building on the fundamentals and the basics, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I have Robert Peel's laws sitting over, taped over my desk by my computer at work, and I keep that there right next to the laws of combat
Yep.
by Jocko. And we've mentioned that a couple times on the podcast, and you mentioned the books and everything like that. But I don't know if everybody listening knows what we're talking about. And so go ahead, give us because this is how you and I met. I know this is such a key element in how you do what you do. It's a key element in how I'm leading my guys, or trying to lead my guys and girls. And so tell us what we're talking about when we talk about the books and we talk about Leif and all these guys.
Yeah. So I agree with you on I have a big poster of Sir Robert Peel's right next to It's All on You, but it's not about you.
Right.
So I see those every day. And much like the laws of combat that you talked about, they're leadership principles. And so, I started back in like 2005. I stumbled, 5 years ago. I stumbled across the Good video.
Right.
And I got introduced to that. And I went, I kind of like that guy. I kind of like what he has to say. Right.
Yeah.
He's kind of intense. I like it. Right.
Right.
Because I'm kind of I'm intense in things that I do. So I started watching his podcast and, listening, and I get the books and I start studying, and then, I find out about EF Online, and because it's like, well, what will it take to get Jocko up here? And I get his price list. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not happening. Right.
Right.
So then I end up, getting on the EF Online, and I was blessed to get on it like right from the get-go, like right when they introduced it. So we're on it, and like JP was one of the first presenters, and Jamie Cochran, and then all of a sudden, Jocko's on it because COVID hit.
Right.
And so I wish my camera was working, because I've got notebooks of notes that I've written from this stuff. And my book is got tabs upon tabs, all three of my books. And so I start studying, the books and so like, I got the tabs. If you look at this, it's all tabbed up.
Right.
Extreme ownership.
Yeah, you do have
strategy, tactics. And then I got, there's a couple of notebooks that are just filled up with leadership notes from these meetings. So as we started to progress and started to study this stuff, I was deputy chief at the time, and some of the guys were, one of the big complaints from the line staff was like, hey, what direction are we going as a department? And that was one of the things that when I became chief, I wanted to provide some leadership principles for everybody to be able to say, okay, hey, look, this is, if you have questions, here's where to go for the answers.
Right.
I don't want to be the easy button all the time and just provide everybody with answers. I want them to think and get those answers. And so we started to implement the laws of combat, or the leadership principles, and it really focused around our mission. What really drew me to them was that they were very mission focused, and they were very, very big into building relationships and being humble, checking your ego at the door, which were all things that constantly, like, as I taught leadership classes, as starting off as a sergeant all the way to today, is something that, I've always talked about. And so that would really, we were aligned, I guess is the best way to say that. Our missions were aligned in how, things should be done. And so we started to implement like the laws of combat here about, well, what's the mission, right? What's our driving force? What's our mission, vision, and values, right? What's our preservation of human life, and then talking about simple, we started implementing readbacks.
Yeah.
So
sit reps.
Yeah. Like, hey, what did you just hear me say? Because like, I think I'm communicating at a level 10, and really I'm communicating at like a level 3 or below. Right. So I got to say, like, what did you just hear me say? Because in your mind, you're thinking, it's kind of like as an instructor, like we talked about earlier, I think I'm teaching at a level 10, but really I was more like at a 5 or a 6.
Right.
And so as a leader, or anywhere in the department, if you think you're communicating simple, clear, and concise, you need to do a check to make sure you're communicating simple, clear, and concise, and making sure that those things are being relayed back to you so that you understand, okay, I need to be more clear on what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And then we started talking about, okay, what are our priorities here? How do we execute those things? When you're feeling overwhelmed, how do you feel? And what do you need to do? Well, obviously you need to detach, take a step back, look around, take a breath, make a call, right?
Yeah.
And then one of the things that has been really great here is the decentralized command component. My guys, they'll come into my office, or we'll be talking about something that they want to do. I go, what do you think I'm going to say?
Uh-huh.
And they look at me and they go, we think you're going to say, come up with a plan, and then come up with some backup plans, and how much is this going to cost, and how is this going to impact the department? Okay, go get it done, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, if people have ideas here, I like the ideas to be driven from the bottom rather than from the top
Right.
down. I
Yeah.
like them to come from the bottom up. And we really implemented that decentralized command component of going, everybody leads.
Mm-hmm.
So and then and that taking that ownership is huge too as a leader. Nobody wants the finger pointed at them when something goes wrong. And if something goes wrong in my department, at the end of the day, it is my fault.
Right. Right.
And if I didn't communicate, rather than going, well, you didn't hear it right, that nobody wants to hear that. And looking back at my career when I was a younger patrol officer, the finger got pointed at you all the time for things, and very rarely did a supervisor take ownership. But those, when I look back at it, those are the leaders that I gravitated to, were the ones that did take ownership of things.
Right. And you're going to see that every time that a guy is like, yeah, I like the person who's not putting the blame on, but is willing to take it themselves, because that means they're willing to step up and lead me as opposed to push me,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. But that whole idea is difficult, I think, for cops and police in general to grasp, is because we're A-type personalities, we're used to, we're creatures of habit. We like to do the same thing, and we get used to doing that. So when you start saying, hey, you got to be humble, well, I've seen all these A-type personalities, they're not humble. Well, they're doing it wrong. You take an A-type personality who is humble, and they have people wanting to listen to what they're having to say. It takes me back to that Winston Churchill thing I was talking about. That guy, obviously, he could talk people into making them want to follow him, that sort of thing. You take Jocko, who had, he's obviously an A-type personality, but he's humble about it. And he's like, yeah, you're right. I did mess up, or whatever the case is. And I remember seeing an interview with him where he's talking like Russell Brand, and he was talking about, like, what happens if you get in road rage? You just tell the guy, oh, you're probably right. I probably shouldn't have, changed lanes the way I did, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And so as cops, we have a hard time with that, where okay, so humility, I got to be humble. Yeah. You also have to, put others first. You have to let other people lead. Oh no, but I'm A-type personality. I got to be in charge. Let somebody else lead. Let that decentralized command happen. Let other people come up with ideas. Let other people. And so it's hard for police departments, or police officers in general, to adhere to that stuff. But once they do, they start, like you said, you start seeing this growth where people are like, oh, and they want to be there, and you start building morale, and you start building this desire to, and the job becomes fun again.
Yeah, I think that's a problem across the board with first responders, from listening to the fire and watching, things with my fire department and EMS. I think they suffer from the same issue that we do here. And it's like, you get into these leadership jobs, and it's like, if you're the chief or the captain or whatever, it's like, I'm the one in charge. Well, it's, yeah, you are, and it's all on you, but it goes back to that saying, it's all on you, but it's not about
you. Right.
And so when you keep that perspective in mind, it's like, who's going to be more effective and efficient in doing their job? Is somebody who's just told what to do all the time, a robot, right? Or is it someone out there who's actually thinking about solving problems? We work with a lot of smart people, and they have a lot of good ideas and ways to do things. And you give them a little bit of juice to do it, and man, they'll run with it. They'll take care of it. They'll make you look good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he goes back to what Leif's always talked about. What does winning look like, right? What does winning look like? Does it look like, a safe community, an effective fire department, a responsible, well-trained police department that's taking care of their community, that's protecting the Constitution, which is what we need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, that's what winning looks like, right?
Right.
So how do you get there? You got these guys like, hey, I got a good idea about how we should do we call it full force training. So that's with our scenario based simunitions. We do that once a year where we're doing
we do something similar. Yeah.
And so let them come up with that. It shouldn't be my ideas. I let them come up with it. I don't want to get in the weeds on that. I say, hey, where are we showing up for training? And I'll go train with them.
Right. Because you have city council meetings to go to and things like that, right?
Yeah, fun stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So no, and it's amazing that those concepts and those ideas have been around for long before we were even on this planet.
Yeah.
And yet it's still something when you expose somebody to it. Hey, check this out. They're like, well, that's kind of weird. That's kind of different. But it shouldn't be. It hasn't been for all these years, and we just haven't looked at it like that. We get so stuck in, and this is because we're people, we're humans. We get stuck in this. Well, the way that we've always done it, because it's easier. Because this is a giant machine, and it keeps rolling on, and this is the way it's always been, and the way it's always been done, and so now we have to look at things the way. Yeah, but things are done differently now because we have to adjust. We have to be able to be fluid and move with the times and what the community, what the people want, and I think there's a one portion, like I said, where they don't want us to do it, and you see that in the media and all that stuff. But the other side of it is there's the people who want to be able to go sleep in their beds at night, knowing that there's the sheepdog is out there ready to do his job and protect them.
Well, and that that was one of the things they talked about at our FBI National Academy conference. They says, "Oh, don't use the term sheepdog." I'm like, I totally disagree with that, because here's the thing: my job, a sheepdog is a protector.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're the guardian of the flock, right? My job, people don't want to be bothered with crime or with the nonsense. They want to be safe in what they do. They want to be safe in their houses. And our job is to protect that. Our job is to protect the Constitution, and the laws and ordinances of our state and our cities or counties. We are the guardians. We are the protectors of that.
Yeah.
And so that's what a sheepdog is. It's not, calling the people sheep, right? And getting it. We get way wrapped up in that term means this. The thing is that we are the protectors.
Yeah.
That is our job. And at the end of the day, what's our mission, right? Preservation of human life.
Yeah.
Go back to what the mission is. And when you look at what's cover move, right? From the laws of combat, from Jocko and Leif, right? It's what's your mission. And if you understand your mission, and if you understand that if you fail, then the team fails, and it's about the team, and it's not about you, then you will understand that that we have to protect that. I may not agree with it, I may not like it, but I have to do my job, right? And I have to do it equally. Right.
And it's just like going into somebody's house, and they have a different way, a lifestyle of living. Maybe a guy has his wife and his girlfriend living there at the same time. That's not the way you do it, but it's his right to have his lifestyle, and you're going to do everything you can to protect their ability to live their life. You're not their judge. You're not their jury. You're not their God. You're not the person that gets to make the decision. You're just there to make sure that when somebody wants to try to come and hurt them or take that away from them, that you stop them or you don't let them do it. And that's what our job is to do.
Yep.
And
I heard solve their problem, right?
Right. And I heard a guy, and I talk about this guy a lot. And I wish one day I'd be able to get him on the show here, but he was a retired chief out of a department outside of Chicago. And he was talking about how you have the sheep, obviously you have your sheep, you have your sheepdog, And then, but that's where a lot of people draw the line. Like, okay, there's just two different types of people. Well, not always, because what does a sheepdog do besides protecting the flock? He's always looking to the shepherd to figure out what he's supposed to do next. Where am I supposed to go? Oh, there's one getting away. And so the shepherd's saying, hey, over that way, go get the one. And so that sheepdog has to go get the one, bring it back into the flock. Mm-hmm. And so we have to remember, and this is something that you alluded to earlier, what are we looking to? Who's our shepherd? Who are we getting where's our why? What's our spiritual connection? And in, some people, and the way Chief Kent Williams was his name, but way he explained it, he says, some guys, their shepherd is taking their boat out on Saturdays or on their days off and just going lake fishing or whatever. Some guys like to go do whatever. And he goes, me, I go to church and I believe in Jesus, and that's my shepherd. And I know he says, this is where I need to be, this is why you do what you do. So you have to determine your why, and you have to figure out what it is and who's your shepherd. But then you're the sheepdog that is looking to that and then making sure that the flock is okay. Not to say sheep because you're weak and you're following this, like you said. It's a general term because there's more of you than there's just a few sheepdogs.
Well, and that's the beauty of our Constitution, right? You have that freedom of religion, which is one of our core, foundations, and our job's to protect that, right? Our job's to make sure that those freedoms are there, and for everybody. Yeah. For everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in protecting the Constitution and protecting people's rights and protecting those things. So, and you said it, what's your why? Yeah. And what's your mission, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I'll be having discussions with my kids and they'll be getting worked up about something because they're teenagers, right? Sure. One of them's 21, but they're young, right? Yeah. And they're opinionated. They're me in younger girl form, right? But, yeah. But one of the things I'm like, well, what's your why? What's your mission?
Right. Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, okay. All right. Let's keep this simple. But then they'll be like, oh, there you go again, Dad. You're quoting Jocko again. And so we'll have that little internal debate. I'm like, yeah, I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I had one of my guests on a couple of weeks ago, John, he's my best friend in the whole world. And he was talking about his dad just before he passed away. He said, who's John? Because when he was younger, he was like, I want to do this and I'm going to do this. And he goes, yeah, I know you want to go do these things, but who are you? Well, I'm this. No, that's not you, because that's not who I see when we have conversations. And that's not you. So you got to determine who you are specifically. And at late teens, early 20s, you don't know. You're still trying to figure it out. But at the same time, you have an inkling of what you want to do or who you want to be. But are you able to explain that? Could you give a TED talk on who you really are? Take that 20-minute talk and say, this is who I am. This is what I believe. And I you probably could now, but could 20-year-old, Roger do that? Something like along those lines. So that just, it's being able to articulate what your why is. And a lot of times people forget that because they're thinking, oh, they have all these other things pouring into their head, whether it's social media or TV or whatever. And they don't think about what is the why in the grand scheme. Why do you do what it is you want to do, which is the bottom line of the podcast, is what makes a hero the hero they are. And when I talked to you earlier, before the other day, you're like, well, I'm not much of a hero, but you got to think about all the things you go through and the people that you're pouring your life into, making sure that they're able to go become something more than what they are, and understanding what their direction is and where their center comes from. If people have no idea what that is, they're just going to go aimlessly through life. But if you have somebody like you who's sitting there saying, think about this, and exposing them to the ideas of them developing their why, they're able to share that with other people, that's hugely heroic in my book. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's, I look at I'm blessed to be able to have opportunities to, learn and be able to have that larger circle of influence. I heard once, I was listening to a guy and he talked about these circle of influences that you have, and how if your circle starts off on the far left and it reaches all the way across, and the circles actually touch each other because they cross over,
right,
then you can actually, your circle of influences can actually be a lot bigger than you think. And so, I look at, being blessed to be able to, if I got a question, I can ask Jocko, Leif, JP, Cody Gandy, Steve Ord, and the relationship that I've had to be able to build with those guys. And,
right,
it's humbling to be able to go, if I got a question, I know where to go for the answer. Right.
Yeah. That's huge. That's huge.
The brigade that we're on with, you can ask a question. And a lot of times I answer my own questions. It's like, okay, what's the answer? I go back to the book, right?
Right.
It's like you go back to the book for, I go back to different books for different things, but
right.
But it just depends on what I'm struggling with, or what I'm struggling for answers with. And, I think we, as people, we get wrapped up in a lot of things, and you talked about this earlier. I mean, man, life is short.
Yeah.
It's quick. And I mean, when Steve died, I remember I went to his church and I listened to one guy talk, and he said, I better be careful with the choices and decisions I make today, because I don't know if I'm going to be here next week. And when you leave, and that kind of goes back to my protect the gift, like what legacy do you want to leave behind? Like,
yeah.
If I get hit by a pickup truck going home from work, what did I leave behind? Did I find this place better than I left it? Right.
Right. Yeah. And I talked
did I leave it better than I found it, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I was talking to Randy Sutton. I don't know if you know Randy Sutton. He's been on the show, and he was a lieutenant, sergeant, everything else in Las Vegas, and he was on Cops and written some books and stuff. And he was telling me, he goes, his big thing right now is this legacy. He's all about legacy and what he's leaving behind, and he wants to make sure that he can help those that need it. And that's just exactly right. What is your use? What is your worth on this planet if it's not have what you're leaving for somebody else? Because once again, you're becoming selfish, and I don't think God put us on this planet to become selfish. He wants to share it with us, and he wants us to share it with others.
Yeah, he worked with a guy by the name of Dan Burns down there. He was a really good guy. He passed away a little while ago, but I went to a SWAT school down in Vegas Metro, and listened to some of the things that he had to say, and he kind of was on that same track. If you talk to him again, you might have to ask about him. Yeah,
he's got a conference coming up in the end of October, and that I'm going to go to. He's like, I better see you there. I said, yeah, that's my plan. And it's all about officer wellness and basically how to, and I think Dr. Gil Martin's going to be there and all that stuff like that. And so it's some really good stuff. So, but what was the name again that
I'm making sure I got the first name right. It might be Larry Burns. But he was their SWAT commander. He was a captain or a lieutenant. But ask him about the SWAT commander's last name's Burns.
Okay.
Great guy. And, I surround yourself with good people, and I guess I look at every opportunity as like, what can I take away from this? And if it's a bad experience, okay, don't be that way. Right.
Right.
So I can learn things from bad experiences as well as the good experiences too. And, and that's kind of one of the things when you look at, what Jocko teaches, and that's about ego, right? Check your ego at the door. I think that's huge. And we talked about kind of what's the problem in with, first responders leadership. A lot of times you get people in there with big egos, and they get wrapped up in it's about them. And, but I've been around some great leaders and first responders that have positively influenced me, that have taught me some good, humbling things. In 2014, I went to the FBI National Academy in Quantico. I was there for 10 weeks, and I was surrounded by great people there. Great examples. Colonel John Forker was one of them. And I talk to him to this day, He was a retired Marine colonel, and he was one of my leadership instructors there. And, just my roommate from Pasadena, I'll call him, or buddy that I met who's the chief of police in Manhattan Beach. I'll call Derek up and, talk to him. Or,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that I still talk to, and, you bounce ideas off of, and don't get, I guess don't ever get married to an idea. If you get married to an idea, or, don't fall in love with your plan, I guess,
Right.
we talked about this on EF Online. You fall in love with your plan, and then it's like, if somebody says something to you about it, man, you get all personal about it. So, and then using that decentralized command component that we talked about from the laws of combat, letting other people have that ownership of things. And you'll find out that when you do let other people run with things and ideas, and they take ownership of it, they'll take more ownership of things within the department. They'll be like, oh, well, what else can I take ownership of? When you let them take those small adjustments, and then they can make other small adjustments. And then at the end of the day, it's a big adjustment that they've made. So
yeah, exactly. And it's amazing that we don't even think about that. And we just think, oh, what they're going to let me do. At least that's when you start out. Yeah. And it's not what they're going to let you do. It's what you're going to take, what you're going to go run with. And it's not their department. It's not, I work for the department or whatever, whether it's fire or EMS or, or nurses, what their hospital, it's police officers, the department. It's your department. It's should be as much yours as it is the chief's, or it is,
I don't own it.
The janitors, or whatever. It's your department. And like you said, that when they see your stenographers, or they see your records specialist, or they see your dispatcher walk outside and they have their, their shirt with the logo on it or something like that. Oh, you work for the department. Yeah. So my department's like this, and we're good, and we're, it's not, doesn't belong to you, but it might as well. You might as well take some ownership into it. Yeah. So it's not yours to do with as you will, but you're not the. And I remember Jocko telling me one time, when you take that position, when you get in a leadership position, you don't walk in there saying, there's a new sheriff in town, we're going to do it my way. You don't do that. And so it sticks with me to this day that nothing. I don't even go into like with anything with my kids and say, hey, this is mine. You will listen to how I say, stuff like that. And that's, maybe I did when I was younger, when I was stupid, but I don't now. And I know
the club.
Yeah. So I know we're getting a little long in time here, and I know we've all got stuff to do. So
sure.
But I want to thank you for coming on and talking about this. I mean, we can talk all day, and we can keep going down rabbit holes, and maybe one day we have you back on, or we can do a trifecta, maybe get Jarrett and Jeff and you on here. That'd be kind of cool too. But
we didn't even get to like department expectations. And
I know it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much more to talk about. There's so much more good things out of these books, and the extreme ownership academy, and the influences of those guys. And, I didn't even get a chance to talk about, rolling with Hoist Gracie up here, and,
see, that's the cool stuff.
Yeah. And, Dean Cain coming up, filming a movie in the Holt Arena, being involved with that. So those are all some cool things. So
maybe we'll get you back on. We can go over that stuff. And,
sure.
But we were talking about EF Online. And if you're not familiar with what that is leadership training. You can go on there, you pay your monthly fee or whatever, and you're in it, and you just learn from leaders and people who want to see you be better. And before you know it, you're making friends, and you're making acquaintances of people who you had no idea would be willing to put time and effort into your life. So, but along those lines, I'm kind of go off on a little bit of thing here. If you want to get a hold of the What's Here podcast, or you want to know more about, some of our guests or anything like that, you got questions for Chief Shei, you can get a hold of us either on Instagram or on Facebook. We're on there. We're on Twitter, and you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn as well. And I know Chief Shei has a couple of different variations that we can, and I'll get that in just a second. But you can also get check out every episode that we've got of the What's a Hero podcast on the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. And you can get, it'll take you to it has links to all these other podcast platforms. So if you're not sure, you're gonna be outside of an area where you're not gonna have service for a while, you can get a hold of that, download every episode that you want to listen to. You want to listen to this one, you want to show your friends, or say, hey, you gotta hear what Chief Shei had to say. This is where you get to see it. So go to our website. You can download them from there. And Chief, how can people get a hold of you if they had questions, or they thought, hey, this was great? And I know that they can obviously look at the Pocatello Police Department and see if you're hiring or whatever. They say they want to be a cop, but what else?
Yeah, so the department website's it's got my email on it, and I'm on LinkedIn. That's it.
Perfect.
And that's it. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I just have LinkedIn. So.
There you go. That's good. So, do you have any parting words for our folks out there?
I guess I'll go back to the book.
There you go.
And I'll go to page, my guys, I just promoted a bunch of new leaders here in the department. And I gave them a copy of Leadership Strategy Tactics. And I told them, I said, they're like, well, what's the best thing, the best words of advice I can give you? And I go back to the book, and I go to page 156 of Leadership Strategy Tactics. It says, be humble. Don't act like you know everything. Listen. Treat people with respect. Take ownership of failures and mistakes. Pass credit for success up and down the chain. Work hard. Have integrity. Be balanced. Be decisive. Build relationships. And lastly, get the job done. Those, and there's a little bit more to that. I just kind of summarized those 12 points. But I can't give any better advice than, what Jocko would give or what Leif would give.
Right.
It's there. Like I said, I wish I had these books 20 years ago. It would have helped young Roger.
Oh yeah. If I can only have been introduced to this stuff long ago. Yeah.
Totally so different. I guess that I would close with that. Get the books, read them. And then practice that stuff. Right.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. Perfect. So I also want to thank all of our vets out there, guys that are on the front line. Thank you so much for doing that. Without you, we don't have the country we have. And for our nurses and doctors that are there ready for us when we're sick, we're not feeling good. You're on the front line. You're right there to make sure that we can get back to our lives. And then our teachers who are making sure we grow up to be good people, but then you're also taking care of our kids. And that's a huge thing, because they, without them, we don't have a future. And it's just hard to imagine where we would be. So our firefighters, we mentioned you guys a couple times on this show. Thanks so much for everything you do. And of course, our police officers who go every single day, make sure that we can live the life we want to live, standing in the way of evil and that thing that wants to try to take that away from us. So we appreciate you more than you know. So for Chief Shei, I've been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.